Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining. We're just going to let everyone get into the webinar, get comfortable as we prepare for another Agritecture webinar, this time in partnership with Moleaer, a leader in nanobubble technology for all kinds of agriculture. And I'm super excited about today's webinar because I've been learning about this technology myself with firsthand experience. So just get comfortable and join. I just want to give you a little bit of information as you join the webinar. Of course, you can use our Q&A feature. Basically, that means that we're going to be able to see the questions you ask, and we'll prioritize the ones that are asked first. So whenever a question comes up, feel free to use the Q&A feature, and we'll be able to go through those with our incredible panelists and answer them the best way that we can. Otherwise, you can also use the chat as well if you want to participate in a wider conversation. And we really would love to hear from you, of course, after the webinar about your experience and what you thought. So again, for those who are just welcoming, we really appreciate you signing up for today's webinar with Agritecture and Moleaer. We're going to be talking all about nanobubbles, maybe something you're not familiar with, but you're going to understand pretty well as we go through this today, and about its applications and impact to agriculture. And if you happen to have to leave a little bit early, we will record this, but definitely stay through to the end because we have Q&A where you can ask questions. And again, you can use the Q&A feature for that. So welcome so much. We're so glad you're here. We're actually having an international series of callers here today, which I'll introduce our panelists in a moment. So first of all, there's me, yours truly, the founder and CEO of Agritecture, the guy who's traveling around the world and loves to showcase different farms and technologies. In fact, today I'm here in Kuwait. It's my first time in this country, and I'm also visiting some farms here. And I'm excited that I can call into this webinar and talk about Moleaer and feature these amazing speakers. We're also joined by Warren Russell, who's the co-founder and chief commercial officer at Moleaer, who's calling in from Los Angeles, so a totally other part of the world. And then we have Richard Smit, who's our manager, who's the manager at the Kruidenaer. And I think I pronounced that pretty well, although I sort of mix it up sometimes, but they're a leading basil grower in the Netherlands. And also I got to visit that project recently. So first of all, to kick things off, I just want Warren and Richard to briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll get into your part, Warren. So Warren, can you introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate it. As Henry explained, my name is Warren Russell. I'm the chief commercial officer and co-founder at Moleaer, where I lead the commercialization of our technology across new applications. I've been very fortunate to have been exposed to a very wide range of application industries over the years, and that practical experience has created a very strong foundation of knowledge and understanding of how to incorporate our nanobubble solutions to solve industry challenges. And one of our first major initiatives back in 2017 was developing solutions for the irrigation and horticulture markets, starting with hydroponics in the US, specifically in leafy greens. And that's taken us all over the world. And I'm excited to be here and share these experiences with you, especially with Richard from Kruidenaer, who is one of our very, very first early adopters in the Netherlands. So I'm looking forward to sharing some of our R&D and findings and fundamentals and how it applies to potentially your operations.
Yeah, thank you so much, Warren, for joining. And coming up in a moment, we're going to have Warren actually share, as he mentioned, some information and case studies about the nanobubbles so you can see how they really work, and the customer service experience as well that Moleaer is focused on. But let's go over to a customer briefly. Richard, can you give us a short intro of who you are and what you do?
Yes, hello. I'm Richard from the Netherlands, and I'm the crop manager here at the Kruidenaer, and we grow a lot of herbs. Our main herb is basil, and we grow it on a hydroponic system. So that's why we are into Moleaer, for example.
Okay, fantastic. Nice little intro there. And it was great to meet you, Richard, recently in the Netherlands. So what I'm going to do next, right before we get into Warren's talk, is actually let's have a quick poll here, because I'd love to know where you all are from, especially those that just joined. So our first poll here should be showing up is, which part of the world are you from? Which continent are you from? So just give that an answer and tell us. Okay, I see people answering these. I always love how global these are to see where people are from. And we appreciate this audience from around the world curious about this topic. As I mentioned, our callers are all from different parts of the world already here today. Great, so we got some heavy focus on Europe. Still some answers coming in. If you can just give your answer to that poll, that'd be great. And then Warren, you can start to pull up your presentation and get ready for that.
Got it.
Okay.
You got to, Henry, you got to enable me.
Yes, I'll enable you right now. 1 second here. Okay, so there we have our results. Okay, give it a try now, Warren. So we see Europe is heavy focus with 48%. Is that working for you, Warren?
Yeah, it's coming up.
Cool. Followed by North America, 29%. We also have some representation from other markets. Very nice. Thank you so much for participating. Okay, great. So Warren, tell us about nanobubbles. Let's hear about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Henry. So this is it's a pretty short, succinct presentation, a little bit about the fundamentals of nanobubbles, and then I've got a couple of case studies at the back end. It's a pretty broad area to try and cover in a short space of time. So I'm going to keep the cadence pretty fast just to run through everything so that we have time to sort of go over the core concept. So we're very passionate about this technology. It's really a pretty phenomenal industry and area of science that we can apply to really unlock the power of water to do more, and essentially that translates to efficiency. We're very passionate about improving efficiency for industries. We've grown exponentially. It's been very, very fortunate. We've exceeded about 3,000 installations in over 60 countries. We do spend a lot of resources on independent validation. It's incredibly important as part of engaging with industry, whether it's corporate partners or developing these commercial applications. We like to work with third-party institutions and academic institutions. And along the way, we've been very fortunate to be awarded various different awards based on these innovations coming out of our R&D and applied research. So just to sort of conceptually help people understand a little bit about what this technology and the important facets of it. So we've really got to do 3 critical things when we apply nanobubbles. We've got to dissolve gas very efficiently in solution. In many cases, it's oxygen. And we've got to create nanobubbles. Nanobubbles are a naturally occurring phenomenon. It's very interesting. What we do is we concentrate these in very high concentrations, and that allows us to achieve certain effects from those introduction of nanobubbles in solution. So if those of you not familiar, nanobubble is a classification of a size of a bubble. It has these unique properties. When you get down to a certain size, it's really in the sort of virus, bacterium size range. But we take that sort of innovation, we package it into these distinct solutions. Typically, we have 3 key components: a pump, our core technology, and a gas source. In many cases, in hydroponics or in horticulture, it's oxygen. And the goal is really to work backwards from solving distinct customer solutions. So we work backwards from what are the pain points within hydroponics or horticulture in general, and really how do we harness this technology to deliver meaningful results to the customer. And generally, that's going to boil down to how do I make these operations more efficient? How do I boost productivity and reduce pain points like labor and chemical costs and that sort of thing? Now, I say that it sounds great, but it's really contingent on achieving certain unique properties or changes within the water. And we focus on the properties. A lot of these are very well understood in terms of the benefits and properties of nanobubbles. But what's critical to that reaction is concentration and surface charge. So it's really important that we have a technology that can operate at scale and that can consistently produce these nanobubbles to achieve these different effects. And we focus in the center here, where it's really about dissolving that gas efficiently in solution, maintaining that as optimally as possible so you get this dissolved oxygen stabilization. The capillary action, which is a really interesting phenomenon with nanobubbles, where it enhances the way that that water moves through capillaries, whether it be substrate or soils, and these additional benefits of scouring and dispersions related to dissolved salts, fertilizers in solution and such. But we bucket the technology into 3 different groups. So first and foremost, we start with water quality. How do we use dissolved oxygen and oxidation reduction potential to improve the quality of the water that's going to the plants, that consequently has a direct impact on the health of the roots? And then also around the roots, the rhizosphere, importantly, that soil and substrate health, whether it's mobilizing salt accumulation in the soil or the substrate, helping to improve that wettability and distribution of those nutrients through that substrate. It all starts with the foundation of a healthy root. There's a healthy root, that's the primary objective, increase that healthy root mass within the plant. Again, sort of these are nice concepts, but it's important to validate them in the field. We've invested a lot heavily over the years in looking at different kinds of facets of these benefits. We have a lot of independent studies, and in the time that we started Moleaer to now, there's literally thousands of papers supporting the use or benefits of nanobubbles in these different applications. So it's really cool, and sometimes we are surprised with really profound effects from applying nanobubbles in solution. Root development, like I said, particularly is in case of the Kruidenaer. You can take hydroponics. Root health is just so critical to the success of that operation, and moving that all the way out into improving water quality in reservoirs and such that's feeding these facilities. Could be an outdoor, could be a berry crop, it could be feeding a greenhouse, but the goal is to try and improve the quality of that water. Use nanobubbles. It's non-chemical, it's sustainable, it's an active treatment that persists over time, and that has sort of really meaningful impacts on the operational costs going into these greenhouses. So just a little quickly touching on these important benefits. Capillary action, super important. It's wholly independent from dissolved oxygen. A lot of people focus on, elevating dissolved oxygen or supersaturating, but we really want to improve the way that water is transporting nutrients, nutrient salts, the way it both moves through substrate as well as soil. So improving that capillary action is highly important. Another big thing in soil-based applications, even cocoa, salinity management, being able to mobilize those nutrient salts. And if you're looking here on the right-hand side, this little heat map shows sort of a side-by-side field orchard where we're using the nanobubble solutions to help mobilize salt in that rhizosphere. So getting that down and out, super important. And then in terms of benefits to the crop, what we consistently see across all crops, it's really crop agnostic, but it's, like I said, it starts with improving that root health, which is important, and you will see that capillary root development and the whiteness of those roots is really important. But what we consistently see across these different crops is an improvement in yield, specifically caliber size as well is an important thing, and the general quality of those fruits, whether it be grade or size, as I said. But we see this, and oftentimes this is presented in more extreme environments. So when you have high temperature events, you do see that separation from the control. So this is a really important tool to help manage against environmental stress. In the case of the strawberry study with Delphi, again, we demonstrated about almost a 12% yield improvement. But if you're looking at sort of the middle of the zone, you see that separation there. And oftentimes this is presented later in the sort of crop cycle. So you see the sustained productivity right through to the end of that crop cycle. So another Dutch grower here, strawberries. We're focused on 2 different areas. Again, from productivity, improving that yields is obviously highly important, but also managing that root health in terms of phytophthora or pythium levels in that. some of the customers are looking to reduce their chemical costs. That could be one objective. It could be to eliminate their chemical cost. It's all site specific. It varies by customer, but there's one thing that this is largely a sort of key highlight of this technology is that it really works well and synergistically with no matter what your farming method is, whether it's organic, whether it's conventional, whether you want to incorporate it and utilize it in conjunction with chemistry. Absolutely no issue. Again, like our objective is really to improve the efficiency of that operation. So to the extent that we enhance a chemical process or reduce it, the objective is to align with the customer and help facilitate that in the most cost-effective way. Yeah, we have a research study that we did with in Spain, looking at tomatoes, and again, sort of two very typical outputs there. We get an improvement in the class size, as well as the increase in productivity. Likewise, the Kruidenaer here, leafy greens, deep water culture. This is where we really cut our teeth in the hydroponic space. Kruidenaer was one of our very first customers. And at that moment in time, it was really about focused on improving water quality and root health within the facility. That resulted in better crop uniformity and cultivation time. And then lastly, in the US here, just as a sort of final case study, just to wrap this up, leafy greens, obviously deep water culture, whether it's NFT or deep water culture, having an oxygen-rich root environment, an oxygen-rich water environment for the roots has two meaningful impacts. One is it continues to allow the facilitation of those metabolic functions with the plant to keep it healthy. And most importantly, we want to keep that disease at bay, just keeping it an oxygen-rich, more prevalent to beneficial organisms in that facility. And when we have a healthy root and healthy water, that generally results in better productivity in the plant. That's kind of the summary, Henry. It's a lot to go through. So it feels like rapid fire, but hopefully that's a good overview of everything.
Yeah.
We can address
I
some
think
questions.
absolutely. I think, it's great for people to get that overview. We see a lot of individuals asking questions, so we're going to be able to get into some specific questions and you can answer those. But
Yeah,
I've been taking some notes because you have a lot of impressive data here and some things that stuck out to me. So I have some questions myself, if you don't mind.
of course.
I mean, my first question was your comment on salinity, right? And that reminds me of the farm that I visited in Spain, right? In Huelva, Spain, where there's a lot of soft fruit production. And so in this case, there was blueberry production that was occurring, and basically the power had gone out on one half of the farm. And
Yeah.
I got to go see what had happened there. And what was really interesting is that one half of the farm was basically still alive, the majority of the plants, and one half had died. And the area that basically was still alive had been treated with Moleaer. And so that was interesting. And, there was a couple different discussions about why that had happened, right? Like why the plants were more in that context. But one of them, sort of was this idea that the chlorine that is in the water was sort of dissipated a little bit more because of the nanobubbles, which meant that they dried up a bit less as that sort of drought condition for 3 days without power, without irrigation in July occurred.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about like what happens there, like how, whether it's salinity or other contaminants in the roots, how the nanobubbles really work to do that, and any other examples of that I find interesting in particular?
Yes, it's fascinating. So it's not one thing. There's multiple impacts that we're having. So first and foremost, just at a super high level, sort of that better water quality with oxygen is going to help foster a larger root mass. That larger root mass is going to literally have more absorption capability within that soil. So you've got a better distribution and better sort of impact from that. We also see a very, very important synergistic reaction with the biology in the soil. And that's probably, like, to me, is one of the sort of really undervalued impact that we're having. So that biology, once we start to convert that rhizosphere into aerobic, we start to stimulate the kinetics of that biology in the soil, that will naturally flocculate those soil particles. And as a consequence of all of that, we've got, now you've got this improved capillary action, so the water and the nutrients are moving more freely through those capillaries. Like in the case of whether it's the chlorides, and we're helping to eliminate those or push those down through the root zone. But once you have that large root mass in this and this more evenly distributed water sort of moisture zone within the facility, within the rhizosphere, you will just get that natural barrier that improves the plant resilience in these high stress events. We've done research on looking at reduced watering in sort of stressful events, and again, in some cases, we were able to demonstrate a 50% reduction in water use. That's not something that we're going out advocating right off the bat, but again, it's when you look at sort of the sum of those parts, you can understand the mechanisms that allow that to potentially happen.
Yeah, fascinating. If I can ask you to stop sharing the screen just so I have you more on the full screen, that'd be great, Warren. Yeah. Okay, I've got a little bit more as well. So I think another one you talked about was the quality and the stress, right? So the idea that the quality can improve through these activities. I think we're going to talk to Richard a little bit about that as well. But, for me, I visit a lot of farms. I think this is increasingly important because farmers are facing so many challenges. The labor costs are going up. They're facing, in some cases, the greenhouse is rising energy costs. And in some ways, to be able to compete, you have to really deliver a higher quality product. Do you have any more examples of that? Is that something you're hearing from your customers where, they obviously are always committed to quality, but they're really trying to get a competitive edge. And that's why they're looking for a new technology like nanobubbles that can help them deliver higher quality.
Yeah, it comes back to what I mentioned earlier, which is, it's hard to think of a singular input that you can apply no matter what your cultivation method is. But to think of, I pose a question to the audience, which is, think of another single input that you can use that can have this broad range of synergistic effects, no matter what you're doing. And like I said, it's the best of both worlds. We're really aiming to use the technology to enhance the efficiency of all those inputs. And the best case scenario is we can actually reduce some of those inputs or offset them in a substantial way that brings meaningful savings to the customer. But the simultaneous benefit is that you're not sacrificing quality by making those cost adjustments or adjustments to your practice. You're still enhancing your cultivation method because, as I said, this is whether it's improving the way the nutrients get to the soil, the biology of the soil, those could be even foliar applications. It could be, no matter what you're doing, you're enhancing the way that the plant is absorbing water, absorbing nutrients.
Right.
And that really has distinct effects on the metabolic functions of that plant.
Yeah. I think it's just, you sort of talked about, there's like a range of benefits that could apply. And so last question for you before I go on to one of your customers that's on the call. And Richard, you've been very, very patient here. But, in the end, it also comes down to the customer service and the customization for these customers in different markets, right? Whether they have more salinity, whether they really want to focus on quality, and there's a lot of benefits. So can you tell us about how you manage that as a global company? How do you really work with the customers to customize it to their needs and those specific goals? Because there's sort of this laundry list of benefits of nanobubbles, but again, it really comes down to their specific needs, and you have projects all around the globe. So tell us about that customer service role and sort of how you differentiate yourself in engaging with the customers through delivering the technology as well as the service.
Yeah, fantastic question, and it's super important because we don't consider ourselves as an equipment provider. And in essence, it's incumbent on us to really understand the customer. And in this case, particularly in agriculture and horticulture, there's, like you said, there's a very diverse range of needs. And it's really important that everybody within Moleaer has a very keen understanding of the cultivation practices and understanding the unique problems that somebody may have. And it's not, unfortunately, it's not one size fits all. There are ways that customers, again, like I said, they could have a disease problem, they could have an input cost reduction that they're targeting, and we've got to sort of customize a solution and that is specific to them. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's a custom product, but the way that we develop and define the solution for the customer and integrate into their process is really targeted towards solving that specific problem. And so some customers in the US have like really crazy expectations in terms of what sort of oxygen level that they may want within a facility, but that may be completely impractical for a farmer in Spain. And so one is understanding the market. I think, you know, through this sort of it's been a very fortunate journey for us where we've crossed a lot of different territories and we've installed an enormous amount of systems, and that has really afforded this, you know, this data set where we get to glean all this critical information about what's important to customers and what moves the needle for them.
Yeah, and I've got to meet some of your team members in Spain. They speak the language, or your team members in the Netherlands that come from a sort of Dutch grower background. I'm sure that reflects in other places. Well, big thank you, Warren. We're going to move ahead because honestly, we are getting so many questions. You all are an amazing audience. I can't wait to dive into them. But first, we have to hear from Richard, who I've been able to meet and visit your farm. So Richard, again, you are the manager for the Kruidenaer, which is a top line basil producer. So all that pesto that both people in the Netherlands and internationally are enjoying comes from yours, but you also sell the fresh product as well to Albert Heijn, I believe. So tell us about the scale of your farm, and specifically after that, get into the journey of learning about Moleaer and again, the problem points. We talked about this question of the unique challenges you're facing. So a little bit of introduction there, but tell us about it. I'm going to pull up an image of your farm as you talk here.
Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah. Well, this is our company. A few years ago, we were always growing basil on water, and I was noticing that the water gets a little bit dirty. So we were thinking about changing the water and put new in, but we are not allowed to flush the water somewhere, or so we had to come up with something else. Then we get in touch with Moleaer, and they said, we can solve this problem. Okay, I want to test it. And the water was really dirty. Yeah? It was, you could not see through it. So we start testing it. And within 3 months, that 10,000 cube of water was crystal clear. You could drink it. The biofilm was gone. So then I knew I had healthy water, and that's what we want. And we started in the first farm that was about 10,000 square meters. And we are still using the same water after almost 12 years. And we never refreshed it. So that was for us, it's working. And yeah, what Warren told me, it's the nanobubbles, they stay longer in the water. And what I found out is that you don't have to get 20 ppm in the water. If you have 10 ppm and the circulation in the water is fast enough, then 10 ppm is enough by 20 temperature degrees. Then you get 100% oxygen. So that's enough. So you don't have to push in 20, 30 or 40 ppm. So the circulation of the water, very important. And what I noticed, the nutrients, iron and mangan, you have to double it because of the nanobubbles, eats it a lot more. What is good for the plant, of course, but that's something what you have to keep in mind also.
Just these variables a bit, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and now we have 5 machines of Moleaer.
Right, and so I got to see that, right? Like I got to see, if you haven't seen the video yet, you can, we'll definitely share it as well afterwards, but it's on LinkedIn and on my Instagram as well. But I got to see you're using the clear system outside. So you've got the typical sort of reservoir where the water is captured from rainwater and it clears that, cleans that before it goes out into your greenhouse or into your greenhouse. And then you've got the Neo system in the facility that's doing that. So did you try both of those systems first, or was there one you tried first before you put the other one on?
first what we have inside. So that's the, how you call it?
Yeah. Yeah.
What we have inside, we have one. And in the beginning, we had a machine that we had to add oxygen bottles on the machine. But
Okay.
the problem was, of course, the availability of the oxygen and the costs. It was about €1 per square meter a year. And with the machine what we have now, we produce oxygen. So it saves
So
us
that's
€1
that
per
input
square
cost.
meter. Yeah.
You definitely emphasize this issue of the water, right? Like you had certain regulations that you can't just dump the water. So you're able to clean
No.
the water with that Moleaer system and do
Yeah.
that. You talked about biofilm when we were in person, right? Which is sort of that sign that the system is low on oxygen and a bit dirty. And it was
Yeah.
very clean when I saw it. I mean, there was no doubt. We
Yeah.
could lift up any rafts and see the roots were clean, the water
Yeah.
was clean. That was like evident as a benefit. But you mentioned a few other benefits while we were there, right? Specifically related to some of the quality benefits that you were seeing, right? Consistency. I mean, obviously it's all
Yeah.
connected, but can you maybe talk about, for those that are a little bit less familiar, how biofilm and having your system be dirty will affect your consistency and what changed for you after that from a consistency perspective?
Yeah, the problem with the biofilm is that there are algae or whatever it is, but they also use oxygen. And I want to use the oxygen for my plants. So I get a better yield, better quality. You saw it immediately. And what you mentioned with the guy in Spain with the strawberries, if my system falls out on a hot day for 1 day, I see the difference.
Right. You see the change.
Especially when it's hot. So I get stressed out when it's not working, the machine. We really need it. Yeah. It's working, yeah. Now we tried different kinds of oxygen with the the stones in the aquaria, the big bubbles,
air
but
stones,
big bubbles come up and they leave. So yeah.
Okay,
so we're very happy with it.
Thank you for that explanation. And Richard, we're gonna have some questions that I think you can help answer too. But Warren, I want to go to you a little bit for a moment. Can you explain a little bit more just the basics of, Richard mentioned heat, right? And this is a key issue with oxygen is as the heat goes up, the oxygen goes down. So are you seeing a lot of your clients, especially in hotter regions, benefit from this technology?
Yeah, absolutely. That literally is one of our origin stories, which was sort of faced with the prospect, like, can I grow this leafy green in very warm water, which in this case was close to 31 degrees C. And naturally, when you have that, it's kind of you have two compounding issues. One, that warm water, it has a natural tendency to have lower oxygen level in the water. So you've got warm water with low oxygen. It's just really ripe conditions for Pythium. And so again, like one of the first things that we looked at was, if we supersaturate that water and keep a nice healthy oxygen level, can we continue to grow these leafy greens in warm water conditions? And the answer is yes. That being said, it should also be sort of clarified, because it's important to note, because it is a very common misconception. But sort of I'm sure the Q&A, a lot of people have a lot of questions about Pythium because it's such a pervasive issue, and it's a difficult one. So just to make sure everybody clear and has sort of the right expectation, because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, which is Pythium, right? Like it's everywhere. It can get into your system. It can come in through the air. It can be in water. Our goal is to create a condition within the water that is not conducive for its growth. Nanobubbles, as well as, again, there's a lot of misinformation about, like, creating hydroxyl radicals and really eliminating or inactivating Pythium. And we do that, but through a competitive exclusion process, which is, promote the good stuff, make the conditions not conducive for Pythium growth. And that's how you start to control it. If you do have a full-blown Pythium issue within your pond, nanobubbles and high levels of oxygen is one part of the solution. You do need to incorporate, whether it be beneficial organisms or some other oxidant, to help get a better control over it. But think of nanobubbles or oxygen nanobubbles as more of this prevention tool than an active treatment tool. And that's an important distinction that I think is kind of muddied in the marketplace.
Yeah, so I mean, it can solve some problems, right? We talked about the water being dirty and biofilm, and this case study of it cleaning it out. But in the case of some of these contaminants, it's not necessarily a treatment. It's something that you want to get in your system early on as part of your practice
Exactly.
to keep it healthy, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah,
preventative medicine versus, just sort of
exactly.
going to the
Yeah.
hospital or that sort of thing. Okay, I've got one more question. So you all have been very patient because you have so many interesting questions coming in here. But Richard, I want to talk to you because I got to meet Roll, who's your sort of local Moleaer rep.
Yeah.
And, farmers are skeptical of these new technologies, right? Like they get marketed and pushed to all kinds of directions. I'm sure you've been through this for years.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I want to hear from you. Like, what is your experience working with the Moleaer local rep? I mean, getting the questions answered, learning about it, setting up the pilot. I mean, share with us honestly what that experience has been like. Do you feel like they understand your needs? Anything like that that would be interesting to learn about?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can tell you a lot about it, but it is plug and play. And what the maintenance is important with every machine, of course.
Yes.
So what we do is every 2 weeks we clean it with a little bit of peroxide or acid. That's the only thing we do. And we almost never have problems. And when we have, we call Roel, and within a few days, when he is around, he's coming and he solves it. For now,
Yeah.
that's better. In the beginning, that's maybe an issue. Your sizes of the PVC is American, yeah, and it's a difficult way to get it here. So the first problems we have to wait for 6 to 8 weeks to get material to fix it. So then I told to not Roel, but I think it was Michiel, you have to have a depot here in Europe. So if something is broke, is of course it needs to be fixed fast, because what I told you before, on a hard day when the machine drops out, then I get stressed. So that was a point in the beginning where I said, hey, that has to be better. So
Yeah.
overall, yeah, it's an easy machine to clean. It's no problem. Everybody can do it with the right instruction. And yeah, if you call Roel, and within a week he's always here. So
Yeah, that
Want to talk more, or do you want me to?
Yeah, no. It's such a critical point, I think, in terms of how we think about selling it. Certainly in the earlier stages, when you're growing and you're building out the infrastructure, it takes time to catch up to that market. But I think that's across the board such a critical point. Like we try and now intentionally not sell where the equipment cannot be supported. And specifically to Richard's point, that was an early thing to remedy. And so all European metric systems are built in Spain now, so that's well supported. But it's a critical thing. I mean, you got electrical, pneumatic pumping systems. These need to be well supported within the industry, within the markets that we're selling into. And nobody wants their equipment to be down, not be able to be serviced. And so that's the risk of sort of working outside of companies that don't have that infrastructure, because yeah, it becomes a big challenge getting that support.
Well, we love the live feedback session as well, and the honesty. That's always what we can expect from the Dutch, and that's what we want to hear from a grower, right? Is the real situation.
Absolutely.
That's the best way. And I think it's so inspiring to hear when growers and technology companies are working together to innovate, right? To learn and benefit each other. That's what it's about. So we have to get into a lot of questions here now, Warren and Richard. Okay, so let's talk about, let's see. Some of them are probably gonna be for Warren, but we'll see what we can get through. So this first one is about, how the system works with NFT systems, right? Nutrient film, hydroponic systems, that are at the angle. Those have a little bit more oxygen in general than the shallow raft system that, or the deep water culture system that Richard Smith has. So, just briefly, Warren, what are some results that you're seeing in those?
Yeah, same principles. I mean, ultimately all boils down to water quality. The film, as it's traveling through the raft, oftentimes the systems will struggle with uniformity. The first earlier part of the channel will get a little bit more optimization from that water, but as you go down that channel, oxygen may be depleted, as well as other sort of challenges. So we still actively focus on where that water is captured, and we're treating that actively. There are other challenges associated with NFT, sometimes depending on the substrate that they're using. There can be contaminants that can come into the water. So it's same challenges in terms of disease pressures, water quality and clarity, oxidation reduction potential, and oxygen. The challenge with NFT though is you inherently have a loss through that system, and just the natural way the gravity, the way the water travels through that system, you have a higher loss rate compared to other systems. So it just means that we need to apply a little bit more on the front end, and the customer has to accept that the baseline is always going to come back no more than at saturation. But yeah, we have a number of NFT installations that have largely the same challenges in terms of water quality that everybody else has. So the technology is the same. The way that we apply it is slightly custom to that specific way of cultivating.
Okay. Fantastic. Thanks for that. I mean, I guess it's the turbulence as well, right? So, the
Yeah.
turbulence is going to affect that saturation to some extent and the efficacy of those nanobubbles. That's great to know for those NFT growers as well, but still benefits there. So what about like different types of substrate? One question here from Mark is about the high porosity perlite substrate, right? So certain substrates can have a lot more spacing for oxygen itself. Is there a similar principle there where you might not see as much of a benefit, or it's a different benefit? Talk about that a little bit, Warren.
Yeah, so for sure, across the board, you as a grower, you're going to see the most impact in the more marginal. So you got compacted soil, where we can really impact that in a meaningful way. Likewise with cocoa, it has great properties in terms of buffering, but has limitations in terms of that salinity accumulation. So we want to impact that as much as we can. When you look at the far end of the spectrum with rock wool, it's well optimized, right? So it has the right pore structure, it has good drainage, which allows the oxygen to come through. But even so, we early on we did some studies looking at the way that again, like specifically to rock wool, and the way that oxygen is maintained in that substrate. And when that water does come through and drains through, there is a natural depletion of oxygen inside those pore spaces because the water is displacing the air in there. And the way that works is as the water drains through, it creates a vacuum and brings air back into that root zone. But actually, what we've been able to demonstrate, if we start with sort of the supersaturated or saturated oxygen in the irrigation water, it never gets that depletion zone while we're watering and irrigating the plant. So we look at that root zone and the oxygen availability in that root zone, even though it has ideal pore structure, but there are still intervals when we're watering where there's a natural drop off in oxygen, and by impacting that, we can still have sort of enhancement in nutrient absorption during those periods of irrigation.
Super interesting. And we got a couple people asking this question, which I think is a pretty common one you probably hear, but there's obviously aeroponic technology which mists the roots, whether that's in a vertical farm or in a greenhouse. And big value proposition for that is you're creating a lot of space for the roots to have maximum oxygen.
Yeah.
Is there any benefit to nanobubble technology or Moleaer's technology in an aeroponic system? And if so, what is that? Maybe, for example, any aspects of the common issues of clogging of the nozzles, which is a super common issue across aeroponics.
Yeah. So to be perfectly honest, in the commercial realm, we don't get a lot of inquiries too much in the aeroponic space. So I wouldn't pretend to tell you that we have a lot of experience. However, the same principles apply. So the limitation of that system, as you described it, is not oxygen. And so we look at okay, within this cultivation method, what are the pain points? And like you said, it could be biofilm of the emitters getting clogged. Can nanobubbles have a role in reducing that biofilm? And that's something that we've demonstrated. It's one of sort of the foundation benefits of the technology. And then as well as complementing whatever water treatment, that when that water is captured and going through the recirculation process, you're still going to have the same potential disease pressures, all those sort of things. So So then is oxygen nanobubbles the right tool to complement the treatment of that water? Not, and again, and with understanding that oxygen is not the limiting factor for that particular method, but we want to enhance microbial reduction, or we want to improve biofilm removal. So absolutely a good use for the technology.
Okay, and vertical farming, these are a lot of questions for Warren, Richard, but vertical farming applications.
No problem, no problem. I'm listening and learning.
We're all learning here together, right? So yeah, what are the, maybe some examples of vertical farming customers that are using? We got a couple people here interested in that.
Yeah, so kind of the same principle. So it's I vertical farming, I correctly or not, like sort of a lump like NFT in the same concept where we're recirculating the water to the top. It's draining down. Sometimes in film, sometimes it's a little bit more dispersed. The same limitation. So we've worked with some of the largest vertical farmers in the world, and again, like they have the same challenges. It's water quality improvement. The primary limiting factor of this system is that no matter what saturation level I start with, so I can take that source water to 30 parts per million, it's gonna come back at 10. So there's once it goes through the gravity fall and is mixed with ambient air, you're gonna drop down that saturation. So really, the most common things that we're requested to address, it's biofilm, it's algae, it's disease, and then uniformity through that drop. So same thing, the customers, the slightly higher operating cost because they do have to apply a little bit more oxygen depending on what their set point is. There's going to be a natural loss through their process, but it's an acceptable loss based on the value creation.
Yeah, I guess it really depends like what kind of irrigation system they're using, the depth of their water, how much of that water, specific issues they're facing. I mean, there's a lot of variables there. Okay, so we got a question about the benefits to, different crops, blueberries, raspberries. We talked about the blueberry example from Spain at the beginning, but this has reminded me that I do want to know from our audience, what are you all growing or interested in? So what crops are you interested in is this poll now. So we've got leafy vegetables, fruiting vegetables, herbs, berry and small or soft fruits or microgreens. This could be what you're growing or what you're interested in learning more about as we continue through the final stretch of this webinar. And we are going to be capturing your questions, so we're going to do our best to get back to you. A number of you have asked about the contact information. Certainly, we're going to follow up with a direct opportunity to communicate with Moleaer. And then if you have questions for Richard, you just send them through me and we'll filter those out. Since Richard's very busy growing basil, we'll make sure he gets the best ones. But I'm sure Moleaer is happy to answer any of those questions in this case. So pretty even split here, but it looks like we've got a decent amount of berry and small fruit growers here, which is really interesting. So there we go. We should be able to see the results now. So got a 30% in the berry and small fruit level. So Warren, tell us about that. As I mentioned, I got to see the blueberries in Huelva, the sort of center of soft fruits for Spain and I think Europe, growing under a lot of shade structures, these lighter greenhouse structures. But tell us more about some of those examples for soft fruits and berries.
Yeah, we've actually we've had a lot of experience down in Latin America, specifically Chile and Peru, looking at predominantly blueberries, and again had great results across the board in those two primary areas, which is generally yield and caliper size. And we work with in soil and substrate, both principles, but I think of all the berries, it's strawberries, blueberries, and raspberries are our predominant crops that we have systems and operating at a commercial scale with. And again, like particularly berries, particularly guys growing in cocoa substrate. I didn't include it in this side just for the sake of time, but really interesting phenomenon when we track the EC and the moisture level in the substrate, particularly cocoa as I'm describing. Really interesting phenomenon changes in terms of the behavior of that moisture and EC once we start to introduce that nanobubbles. And really, again, like the benefits of EC and that buffering capacity, it's a little bit more forgiving. It's great. It's a perfect substrate for berries, but it does have its limitations. So when we oxygenate with nanobubbles, we're helping one on a base level, improving the oxygen to the roots, but more importantly, just managing that salinity accumulation. And yeah, the results of whether it be the vegetative growth of the plant, very noticeable development, fruit setting, and then consequently the productivity is pronounced.
Great. We've got some questions for you, Richard, so I hope you're ready.
Whoa.
This one's interesting. So fresh produce from Holland often has a reputation for tasting watery. Do nanobubbles improve flavor? Have you had any feedback from customers, any change in your flavor? I mean, I'm curious about that, or even that comment on watery taste of the Holland product.
Yeah, but not with basil.
Not with basil, right?
It's
Mostly
not.
with,
It's not watery. No.
with tomatoes, for example, right?
Yeah, that's what they say. But I'm not sure about the taste because I always grew some different species of basil, and the taste. What I noticed is that the taste of the species of basil is different.
That's the biggest driver, right?
That's the biggest driver, but I could not say if the taste increases of the nanobubbles. I think, yeah, when the plant is growing healthy, of course, the taste is better than when it's not growing so healthy. And yeah, the plant grows healthy because also of the nanobubbles, not only nanobubbles, climate, fertilizers.
Yeah,
But
a lot of factors are going into that.
yeah, it's never one thing, eh?
Yeah. Okay, so this is another follow-up question for the basil grower. That's you. Did the terpenes, the aromatic compounds, increase as well as the sort of overall quality and health of the plant? I mean, have you noticed any changes? This is not about taste in this case, it's about the aroma. Are they more aromatic, or is that still something you would give a similar answer? This is driven by the conditions combined plus the variety.
Yeah, that what yeah, everything combined, taste, breed, but the aromatic, yeah, I don't know because I smell basil every day. I don't know about the aromatic if it's getting better or not. You tell me. You will with us.
Go buy to Kruidenaer basil and tell us about it. Okay. Well, thanks for that. This question here, Warren, is for you from Tania Pina. Let me see if I can nail this one properly. With raising water temperatures, the oxygen holding capacity of water decreases, right? So as it goes up, we talked about this, that goes down. Is it true for nanobubbles too? Are people using chillers in conjunction with nanobubbles? Or is it something that might be able to maybe reduce those need for those chillers? So again, if you're in a hot climate, you got a lot of water, your oxygen is going to go down. A lot of people use chillers to combat that. So just walk us through that again.
Yeah, so it's a good question, and it's a nuanced answer. So I think it largely depends on the grower itself. They have their own conditions which they like to grow. There's no question the cooler water is going to be more ideal for your crop. There's that I think that's well understood and established through a number of years of research and development. But what we do is we have some customers that have really come to us and said, look, like whether it be the rising energy cost, they want to not cool as much. So instead of being at 22 degrees C, maybe they're at 24. And they want to use this as a way. So there's an element of risk that you incorporate when you do run at a higher temperature, and consequently, we would just work in conjunction with that. So we have really the full end of the spectrum, which is on one hand, we've had customers coming to us and say they want to have an alternative. They're not quite in the extreme 30 degree, 28 degrees C. They would prefer to not be able to use a cooling system, and they use oxygen, dissolved oxygen as a way to manage for that, and they've been very successful at that. We've had also systems where, for whatever reasons, they have other stresses in the environment, and that hasn't been as successful. So it's not like a tried and true thing. I think it's highly circumstantial to the ecosystem that we're going into. So the short answer is it's definitely possible. Most often the ideal is you work in conjunction with it, and then based on your own experience, you dial in one or the other.
Got it. So we have another question here. This one's about, can you combine Moleaer system with different gases, for example, methane or something else connected with it? Can you combine them to deliver other gases?
In our case, as long as we have a compressed gas, we can inject it. We predominantly, again, not so relevant the methane or natural gas, not so relevant to hydroponic, but yeah, you can use it CO2 for acidification, so an alternative to sulfur burners. You can inject CO2 to balance your pH. There's some nice research on using nitrogen nanobubbles to help with germination of seeds. We've played around with hydrogen nanobubbles, which also has some very interesting effects. So yeah, so for the most part in hydroponic applications or agriculture, we're either using air or oxygen predominantly.
Okay, I'm seeing a lot of questions about different methods of irrigation again. So I just want to sort of ask you a general question again. You know, we know there's a range of benefits. We've talked about that. We've talked about biofilm. We've talked about quality. We've talked about sort of managing salinity. We've talked about managing heat, et cetera. But when it comes to irrigation, let's say, you know, aeroponics being on an extreme end and, you know, just regular irrigation, well, I guess drip irrigation, basic outdoor irrigation on this end, probably on the low-tech side. And we've got some things in between. I mean, is there a lessening benefit as we get to, let's say, certain types of irrigation? Can you walk them through that? There's a lot of people in this audience that are trying to understand, if I have a drip system or if I have this system, you know, is it going to benefit? Is it going to make sense? And I know that's not an easy answer, but you have to give us an easy answer, Warren.
Well, it is pretty simple actually. So we bucket it into two, and I said, like, it depends on what the treatment objective is. So, you know, we have a lot of outdoor installations where we have inline systems. It could be treating for avocados, it could be citrus, it could be whichever. And particularly in California, there's no sense in using oxygen if you're treating 1,000 acres of almonds. It's never going to be cost effective. But there we use whether it be sprinkler or drip, we're using air nanobubbles to help with those capillary actions that we described. So salinity management, nutrient distribution, that kind of stuff. So as long as there's alignment between what we're trying to do and the use of the technology, then there should be no issue. The issue is if, in a hypothetical sense, is if you are super saturating the water, so you're elevating the oxygen beyond saturation point, and then you're putting that through an overhead sprinkler. That would make no sense, because the moment it's coming out of that head, it's going to be going back to the natural equilibrium saturation. So it's hitting the plant at 100% saturation. So even if I went to 200%, makes no difference. By the time it's hitting the plant, it's at 100%, and basically that's all a loss. So it really depends on whether we're centralizing the value proposition tied to the nanobubble and what are the known benefits and functions of that input, or is it oxygen driven, and then again we want to stay within the drip system and manage that accordingly.
Okay, well, that's about time, gentlemen. And, you know, I want to thank all of our audience. Don't leave yet, because you're going to be getting an email from us with not only this recording, but an opportunity to speak with Moleaer about your unique opportunities, unique challenges, if you'd like to learn more about their technology and their approach. So many of your questions were really inspiring to me because they were so specific about the substrate, the irrigation system, the challenges you're facing. So I can see that there's opportunities for really in-depth conversations to see how this could fit for you. So we're going to make sure that Moleaer gets those questions, and we're going to be able to have an opportunity for you to speak to them, which I think is very exciting. I want to thank Richard, our grower, who joined us here today from his busy schedule of growing the best basil, to join us to talk about his experience with Moleaer's nanobubble technology. Again, Richard, you were such a good host. I'm going to send you the video interview we did, and that's awesome. That's on our YouTube as well. And Warren, thank you for joining pretty early in the morning from PST. Thank you, everyone, for joining another Agritecture, and this time with Moleaer webinar, all about nanobubbles and their impact on irrigation agriculture. So thanks so much, everybody. Have a
Awesome.
great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Pleasure.
bye bye.